Okay, so good morning, and we're in the heart of the summer, so you can understand my attire. Won't be usually how you see me, but it is warm out. So we have my friend Rob Whitehead with us this morning, and Rob, I think you were asking what's the nature of consciousness we were talking about.
That's right. How did you get involved with all of this work to begin with?
Well, that's quite a long story, but I think for this morning,
Okay.
I'd like to just go and talk about consciousness in terms of the way Rupert Spira defines it.
Okay.
He does it beautifully in an interview with Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
And he says, consciousness is that in which all our experience appears, number one. Number two, consciousness is that by which or with which all our experience is known. And lastly, consciousness is that out of which all our experience is made. And you and I are that consciousness.
So how can we use this in everyday life?
Well, I think whenever we're in the heat of the moment, that's when we want to be able to really apply this, is to be able to realize I'm having this experience, I'm getting overwhelmed, and then suddenly you can stop, take a breath, and say, I am that which is experiencing this being overwhelmed. I am that which is aware of being overwhelmed. Now, the trick is like these great teachers in India will point out, the great teacher will say, the student will say, yeah, I'm depressed. He says, are you aware of being depressed? And the student will say, well, yes. Well, then, if you're aware of being depressed, you are not depressed. Your body mind is.
That sounds like a very tricky thing to shift your focus on. How difficult do you find this practice to be?
Well, I think if you just, for example, right now, as you were speaking to me, I am that which is aware of you speaking to me. Okay? So just saying, I am that which knows or is aware of this experience begins to point us to something that is constantly there, ever present in every experience that we have, without which we wouldn't have an experience. So it's very subtle to just pay attention to how that is different from the experience. It's as if we're walking around with a windowless window frame called the now. And in the now, we always think like one moment after another. But really, there's only one moment, only one now, always. It was now when I shaved. It was now as I'm talking to you. It was now as I was listening to you. All those were content changes within that now. So that ever-present element of experience, that which is experiencing is you. What you experience isn't you. It's maybe an aspect in terms of a feeling in your body or a thought in your mind.
So if I'm in the supermarket shopping for food and I find myself getting impatient or angry about something, how do I use this?
Okay, I would advocate drawing from one of my earlier books for that, 8 Steps to Love, where you basically take some steps right away, a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual step if you need it. And that would be picturing a big red stop sign and yelling in your head, stop. Then take a breath, and as you breathe in, you notice the air is cooler than your body temperature. And as you draw the air over those sensitive nasal membranes, you think cool mind or cool head. And as the air warms up in your body, you bring it back out, warm, calm body. So that from the neck up, you're cool, and from the shoulders down, you're calm. So that's the first step. And then you can say, and I'm going to deviate from my first book, other than that step, to say, breathing in, I am that which knows or is aware of this impatience. Breathing out, I am not this impatience. Now, going back to the other book, I would say, my impatience is telling me, I hate it that this store is a mess. And that's because I'd love it if it was clean and I knew where everything was. Now, that's what we call stress, the gap between what I would love to have things be and what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And my perceived gap is an ability to close that gap. So is there anything I can do about it? Well, if I can, I'm going to go talk to the manager. If not, take a breath, let it go. And then with the final step, you would say, breathing in, please help me see this situation in a new light so I can let go of my stress, find peace and resolution. Breathing in, let go of my stress, find peace and resolution.
So is this process one that you permanently reside in, the state of consciousness, or is it something that you go to and take repose in, or is it part of
Right,
your
that's a
daily existence?
great way to put it. Yeah, it's like in A Course in Miracles, they have an affirmation they use, which is, "Today I rest in God, and I let Him work in and through me as I rest in God." So, in a sense, you are always this awareness. You are always consciousness primarily. If you think about it, when you get up in the morning, the only thing that happens first is I'm awake, and I'm aware that I'm awake. Now, that element of ever-present element, every experience, is always there. So, in a sense, you can rest in that, but it's being aware that you're in that. Okay. So, in a way, when you worded it like, do you then seek this out for repose? In a sense, you do, because we're caught up. But in reality, you're always there. You just don't know it. So, just taking a breath and reminding the mind, that's really where the trick is. The mind needs to be turned backwards, inward, taking a step back into that paradise of our true nature, the repose that you said.
So what happens if you're in a relationship and you have practiced this and your spouse or significant other doesn't have any clue or does not get involved to the same level that you're involved? Is there any ramifications with that?
Yes, I think basically you need to keep reminding yourself, and this is another little breathing exercise. Breathing in, I am not dependent on anything external to this surface self, this ego, mind, body self, to feel love, peace, and joy. Breathing out, I have everything I need within my deeper self, which is consciousness, to feel love, peace, and joy. Now, you can shorten that. Breathing in, I don't need her to be a certain way for me to feel okay. Breathing out, I can feel okay without her changing. Okay. And then you can give her that space to be where she is, or he is, whatever, the partner, or the person you're with. So it's very key to, what I called in my first book, slay the dragon of dependency, the belief that I'm dependent on stuff out here, my feeling, rather than being inwardly free of external conditions, which we really always are, but we don't know it. We don't pay attention. So that stop and the breath can help you do that.
Okay, so how does this methodology or system or practice compare with your traditional therapy route? When someone goes to a traditional psychologist, psychiatrist, goes back over the conditioning, the mother, the father, as opposed to being aware in the moment.
Yeah. Well, what's happening in therapy is basically over time you're practicing, with the therapist listening to you and reflecting back what they're hearing. They're basically providing that space within which you can begin to examine and look at yourself without being reactive. So, in a sense, after a process of being with a therapist over time, you sort of internalize that listening presence of the therapist in a sense. But in another sense, you're just accessing the listening presence that always is in you anyway. But it's concretely there over time. The person's listening to you, the therapist is hearing things and reflecting back and putting together things, and gradually you're able to do that for yourself and get that inner spaciousness from just reacting and then making a little more choices about the behaviors you're going to engage in.
Okay, now it seems if I try to practice this, sometimes it eludes me. The idea of I take a step, it moves one step away.
Yeah.
Is there something to be said about the practice of surrender, self-surrender, that invites this state, this beingness, the I am consciousness to kind of magically just appear because it's always been there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like what I love what Rupert Spira says. He says it's really a relaxing back into as opposed to out there. And one of the exercises that you do in the practice of these various practices that they do in the ancient tradition of Vedanta is they say, today I I will withdraw my attention from